You get to South Florida, you're getting into leadership roles. You're there with your mentor. Tell us a little bit more about what happened then.
I came down to South Florida. We were having success. We were really meshing and growing. And I was learning from him, and a tragic event happened where he suddenly passed away.
Oh, wow.
And so on the passing of my mentor, then it was, okay, who's going to run the office? And I was next in line for that position.
This is Eric Anderton, and you're listening to Construction Genius, a leadership masterclass. Thomas Edison said that genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. If you're a construction leader, you know all about the perspiration, and this show is all about the 1% inspiration that you can add to your hard work to help you to improve your leadership. Johnathan, welcome to Construction Genius.
Oh, thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Please give the audience a snapshot of your career journey for us, just to introduce yourself, please.
Okay. So, I'm Johnathan Peavy. I manage the South Florida operations for Robins Morton. In my position, I manage pretty much for Lauderdale, Miami, and all of South Florida. Within that encompasses 105 salaried employees and about 125 hourly employees. And I started my journey, I think most of y'all, I don't really sound like I'm from Florida. So I started my journey in Alabama, born and raised in Alabama, in a small town.
College football team. Got to ask.
Auburn. I'm Auburn. So.
Oh, you are?
Yeah, I'm an Auburn guy. So.
Interesting.
We're a lot of Auburn guys, but, and gals. So and truly, I thought I was going to be a civil engineer when I first started out. So kind of unique background I grew up around construction, but kind of fought it and went to Auburn and thinking I was going to be a civil engineer, interned with Robins and Morton, and always gravitated to it. And then when I graduated, I said, I'm still going to be an engineer. So I spent about 9 months on the engineering side until I realized that my personality is not set to be an engineer. I need to go to construction.
Why did you say that about your personality? What is it about your personality that you realized engineering's not for you and you needed to go more to the construction side?
Well, I think my brain's very much engineering, but I like the human interaction, and I like the process and the pace of construction. So as a young engineer, working for just a young entry-level civil engineering firm, doing a lot of drafting. And what really made the day I knew that I was going to make a career change was I had to go present to a zoning and planning board and present a plan of what we were planning to do for this big development. And I had that interaction with the zoning board and with the client. This is probably more me than sitting there just drawing. So
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's cool. So tell us about how you got into your current position at the moment.
So in my current position, how I got here is, it's a history of, like a lot of construction companies, you started from the ground up as a field engineer with Robins, traveled around the mostly southeast from Texas east, working on different projects, climbing up from field engineer, project engineer, APM, PM, senior PM within Robins, managing all different complexity of healthcare projects. That's mostly what we do. Most people know us as a specialized builder. And then I had an opportunity. I was already working in the state of Florida, and I had a close friend who ran the South Florida office, and he was looking to grow it and looking for someone to kind of help him grow that market. And he asked if I'd come down, and I said, sure. I'll come give it a try. Never in my life did I think I would live in South Florida or Fort Lauderdale or Miami. That was never on my radar places to live,
Help me out here because I'm in California. So how do people in Alabama then view Florida? Is there like a sort of a cultural divide or a disconnect, or what's the view there?
No, very similar. Very similar.
Yeah.
I mean, when you look at the state of Florida, you kind of can break it into two halves. You have South Florida and you have the rest of the state. You have the Panhandle. A lot of people call it Lower Alabama. So,
yeah, right.
That's the joke, right? And then you got Orlando, Tampa, Jacksonville. That's Central Florida. And South Florida is just very much, it's a melting pot of the world. So it operates very differently than Central Florida and Panhandle.
So then it sounded like, you kind of went up this corporate ladder, which is, a familiar one for many of the audience in terms of starting off at the bottom, relatively speaking, and then working your way up. Was that something that you always wanted to do? Did you set yourself career goals at the beginning and all those kinds of things, or were you just kind of winging it as you went along?
No, I think, anybody that's very career driven, you set those goals, right? I knew I wanted to do this and always had a desire to be more on the sales and leadership and management of the overall company, from day one of really starting with Robins and Morton. I pretty much knew I wasn't going anywhere else. I would never go anywhere else. I'm been a very loyal approach and always knew that I wanted to grow within this organization.
Why is that though? Because, you said you did an internship. And so, it's interesting. I have sons who are looking to get into construction, thinking about various options. Why did you pick the company and why did you stick with them?
I think it starts from our top. So Bill Morton, one of the owners of the company, primary owner of the company, when his father started the business, it's a very down to earth approach. And so his door is always open. So like I had a direct conversation. We're a large construction company, but I could have a direct conversation with Bill, and it's not Mr. Morton, it's Bill. So like having that, it was very much a family feel. And for a young individual coming up, it was nice to have that. I didn't feel like it was very a high structure where, we had our hierarchy. It was, no, we're a family and we're going to work together.
Let me ask you about the family feel, because many companies, they pride themselves on having a family feel, but then what they struggle with is they struggle with managing performance, because as a non-hierarchical type company, they don't necessarily always push performance. So how do you guys balance that first name basis, so to speak, with pushing performance on projects?
Well, I think what we do a very good job of is of setting those expectations. It is a very family oriented, but we outline what success looks like. What do they want to do, right? Not only just what we want to see as from an organization, but where do you want to see yourself go in life? And when we base it on that, you see a lot of similarities in what people want. And we help them develop a plan that really maximizes their life in the long term. So how we balance it is, with having that humanistic approach, we're able to, like, we sit down and talk, and sometimes they're tough conversations, right? It's like, hey, we got to work here. We need to do things different, but we're doing it out of a sense of caring for you, not because we're trying to hit a bottom line. It's because we see the potential in you. And I've had several of these conversations. Like I challenge some of my younger people that I see their upside and their potential, and I don't think they're fully hitting it. And I've told them that. I said, hey, I think you're selling yourself short. I see more in you than you probably are seeing in yourself.
Yeah.
And I said, I'm going to challenge you because I want you to reach the goals you want to reach in your life.
It's interesting that, because I do think that with young people, sometimes they're figuring it out, obviously, and they're, bring someone in from college, they're in their 20s, they don't necessarily see in themselves the same thing. What do you look for when you've hired a young person that tells you this person, even if they might be a diamond in the very rough, they have the potential to succeed in construction? What are some of those qualities that you're looking at?
From a straight new hire, personally, grades are not a huge thing for me. I will look at them. I want to know they passed their classes.
Sure.
But it's the soft skills that I can't teach you. I can't teach you work ethic. I can't teach you to be a hard worker, open-minded. Can you comprehend? I want to know that you can comprehend. But if we were strictly basing it on your GPA, I would probably not be the first person you hired. So that's the thing, is that, so soft skills. Are you open? Are you eager? Are you hard? Can you tell if you're hardworking? Can you communicate?
Yep.
And it's really that eagerness. If you got somebody that's got a drive and willing to learn, I can teach you just about anything.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I was at an event last night and having the exact conversation with the owner of a very successful GC. And he was like, dude, I don't care. If you've got the right attitude, I can teach you the business.
It's very much true. Very much true.
So you get to South Florida, you're getting into leadership roles, and you're there with your mentor. Tell us a little bit more about what happened then.
Yeah. So, I came down to South Florida and we were having success. We were really meshing and growing, and I was learning from him, and a tragic event happened where he suddenly passed away.
Oh, wow.
And the passing of my mentor, then it was, okay, who's going to run the office? And I was next in line for that position. Now, in my mind, did I ever think that was the possibility of how I was going to end up in the position I'm in today? No. And it was very difficult and something we hadn't ever really experienced in our organization.
Okay. So it's something you've never experienced before. Tell me how you handled it sort of day one. What was the first thing that you did? Obviously you're grieving, but again, it's construction. So we have signed contracts. We have a bunch of money and risk and lives at stake. How did you handle that first day, that first week, that first month?
At the get-go, it was, okay, we're a big organization. The ship is still moving in the same direction.
Yeah.
So as a group, we're going to move in this direction. We're going to honor our good friend that we lost. And I was very transparent and open and really vulnerable. That said, look, we're going to take this ship. We're going to keep moving. I'm probably going to make some mistakes along the way, but we're going to learn as a team and we're going to grow as a team and we're going to get through this together. And that was kind of the sounding foundation for me, is how I was going to operate, is that very open and transparent and vulnerable with him. It goes, yeah, this is not ideal for any of us. Right. This is not, we miss our friend, right? So, that's what it was. He was a friend.
Yeah.
So we, as a group, they saw that, because I had the relationships too with everybody, it was, I met with them individually and I talked to all of my team members, even the ones that from junior level, entry level positions all the way up to my senior leadership that was working underneath me. I met with them and we met as a group. We talked about, hey, I laid out my vision of what I wanted to see, how we were going to implement this, and what key roles they were going to play in doing so.
Now, was that a vision you'd already formed, or was that something where obviously the tragedy occurred and then you've got to begin to process in a way that you hadn't processed before? How did you personally handle that, preparing for those meetings with people as you went through this transition?
I mean, I think outside of the tragedy, I think anybody that sees themselves in leadership position understands or has an idea of how they want to lead and manage. It's the curveballs get thrown to you is how you got to adjust and figure that out, right?
Right.
So for me, I had an idea of, and it wasn't much different than what we've already had. It was just more recognizing and acknowledging what we're dealing with.
Yeah.
And into it and say, hey, this is tough.
Johnathan is eloquently describing the challenges that come up when you move from a project building role to a leadership role. And that's what my course, The Shift, is all about. It's an online self-paced course that you can take. It's about 2.5 to 3 hours of material with a variety of other bonus materials that you can get. And when you purchase The Shift, the great thing about it is it'll give you tremendous insight in how to move from being a builder of projects to a builder of teams and a builder of people. And that's what you really need to be able to do if you're going to be successful in leadership. So whether it's your communication, your time management, your team building abilities, running of effective meetings, whatever the case is, you're going to find it in The Shift in a very powerful, compact, succinct, and to the point leadership course. And it's all online so that you can take it at your own pace, and it's 100% guaranteed. That is, if you take the course and for whatever reason you don't get full benefit from it, you send me an email, I will refund you 100% of your money. So check out The Shift. There's a link in the show notes, theshift.constructiongenius.com, and I know it will transform the way that you lead. All right, back to the interview with Johnathan. Well, what did you learn, do you think, during this time that you couldn't have learned if you just went through sort of a traditional transition where maybe your mentor retired or moved into another position or something like that, and you just kind of took the next step and it was obvious to everyone and people were expecting it, kind of thing?
I think anytime you have that kind of adversity, you see how people rally together.
Yeah.
And so as a group, we all rallied. And, I felt like we would, but I never really know that, I didn't know until we got in that situation how truly it was as a group. And all my leadership, we said, we're going to make sure this thing be more successful than it was. So that was a big driver.
So did you go out and visit the projects immediately? Did you go walk the jobs with your supers and all that kind of stuff? How did you handle that part?
So yeah, I went and visited all the jobs, and then just because it was for a young person, that's some extreme uncertainty. So I have some pretty clever marketing people, and with my last name being Peavy, they came up with the ideas we're gonna have pancakes with Peavy. So
okay.
It was a little catchy, but a little gimmicky. But I would tell you, I got so much interaction because I would bring 5 field engineers together and we just sit and have breakfast and talk. Yeah. And then they could see, I'm in charge. I'm their boss, but I'm not different than them. We can have a normal conversation and I ask them what's their biggest problem. So having that connection with them, what are you struggling with on the job site that I can help you support you on?
Let me ask you this. What was most surprising to you? Because, like when we're thinking through our lives, we paint ourselves pictures of what something's going to be like when we get there. It's like, you're about to get married. You have a picture of what marriage is like. You're about to have kids or something like that. What was different about the leadership role that you stepped into in comparison with the way that you had created the picture in your own head?
There was a lot. I mean, on a personal level, it was tough for me to process that, okay, how I got here. This is not how I envisioned it, right?
Did you feel in any way like illegitimate in the sense that I'm not ready for this or I needed more seasoning? Or did you have to process that yourself internally?
I never felt like I wasn't ready. Like I always had that mindset I was ready. Okay. I could do this.
Yeah.
It's just never planned on getting to this position and being in this leadership and the way I got there. That was harder to process.
Yeah.
Of knowing I'm stepping in for a friend that I lost and processing his passing. So, I mean, that was a harder process for me than it was actually saying, okay, can I do this? Yeah. I knew in my mind I could do it. Now you do what I would tell you any leader, when you take on a new leadership role and, you have those internal questions for yourself, right? Am I making the right decision here or there? Did I ever waver on that? Could I do it? No, I didn't think I never felt like I wavered.
So putting the tragedy of losing your friend in perspective, what was the biggest business challenge you faced in the first 90 days to 120 days in your role?
I think out the gate was I wanted to make sure our clients had reassurance, and they knew that was a big thing. And most of them knew me. They knew me from, I was, managing X's and O's of multiple projects. Now I'm your point of contact for all issues we have, right? Yep. So giving them that reassurance. And then on our employee side, just giving them the reassurance that, hey, I'm still here. I have a new title.
Yep.
But if you need anything, I'm here for you.
What about with the clients then? Were there any clients you guys lost, or even, projects that were in the pipeline, but you didn't win because of the death of your mentor? Was there anything that happened like that?
No, we didn't lose any clients. I mean, I would tell you, we've had exceptional growth since taking over the office, and more than I had ever expected. I would tell you, my first 2 RFPs that I turned in afterwards and pursuits, I lost. And so then it was like, what am I doing here?
Interesting.
I need to rethink this. So a little bit. So but then turn around after that, the next 3 I won. So It's like, but those first 2, you're starting to go, okay, why am I losing projects? And it's just the function of the business. You're going to win some, you're going to lose some.
Sure.
As long as you put your best foot forward and you leave it all on the table, that's all you can ask to do.
And how long have you been in the current role that you're in?
4.5 years now.
4.5 years. Okay. So as you're in the current seat that you're in, and as you've gone through the various seats, how did your mindset shift when you moved from focusing on maybe 1 or 2 projects and being responsible for the profitability of one project to being responsible not only for the profitability of the whole office, but for the leadership of people? What was the main challenge that you had there?
So when you're managing projects, it's kind of your own stamp, right? It's how you envision, how you lead, how you culture a job. So now, taking from a leadership standpoint, I'm trying to get them to understand my culture, what I want to expect on all my projects.
Right.
I want to have a certain brand that we deliver. So the big step there was very controlled. When you're managing your own projects, you can control all that.
Yeah.
But when you're managing 10 projects, 100 people, you're managing personalities, and you got to get them to believe that the way you want to do it is the best way. And that, how do you handle conflict? I handle conflict a certain way. Everybody handles conflicts very different. And I want, when they're dealing with their day-to-day conflict, that they handle it how I would handle it too.
Okay, so you use the word brand there. It's very interesting. What do you mean by brand?
When I refer to brand, I mean, it's just our management style. We're a specialty builder, so we generally get the most complex projects that are common in healthcare, and that's what we're known for.
Right.
I always joke with my clients, I'm like, I don't ever give me the easy stuff. Y'all give us the hard stuff. But we pride ourselves in being give us the most challenging project you got. We can excel at it.
Yeah.
So, and it's building that culture of like, we're one team. We're in this together. This is hard. Construction's hard enough by itself.
Yes, it is.
We don't need to make life difficult for everybody.
Yeah.
So we're not going to operate in individual silos as a design team, an owner, and a constructor. We're going to do this together. And I expect my teams to do that with our trade partners as well. Trade partners, us, architects, designers, and owners. We are one cohesive unit. So we have to make sure we do that.
So that's interesting, right? So let's say you're working with an owner, they have an architect. How do you handle let's say an inexperienced owner, someone who's never been through the process before? And so they may be uncertain. They may be relying on the architect who perhaps has unrealistic expectations. You have to manage that in such a way so that you don't threaten relationships, but you set up the project for success. How do you work through those kinds of conversations?
On a project level for us, it's really start the gate. We sit down together. I want to get everybody in the room. I want to go through expectations. What is their expectation? And then I can understand, like, what are they really looking for? So if it's a, owner that say is not as experienced, their expectations might be sometimes a little unrealistic, or you have a designer that has certain expectations. But if I can at least get in the room and we can sit down, we call it our conditions of satisfaction. What are we going to do to drive this to success? So if we can get in a room and just have a conversation, let's just talk. That's probably something that's lost in our industry a lot. It's starting to get lost more, is we don't talk enough. And so if we can just get there and talk about what does success look like on the project, and each party tells me what that looks like, then I can find where maybe I need to help coach them over certain aspects that they don't understand, and be open about it and try to support them. I mean, we all have strengths and weaknesses, and we're only good as our weakest link, right? So then how can I shore that up and give them the confidence they need?
When you're selling a project, when you're on a pursuit, is the architect typically already been engaged by the owner and you're working through the architect or with the architect and maybe even other engineers? How does that typically work in your market?
A lot of times in healthcare, we're being brought on at the same time. They might be a month or two, or sometimes they might be like a DD phase of drawings, design developments. But usually on healthcare, everybody's going to be brought in before the design development phase.
Okay.
So we have that long history of working together.
And does the owner have a construction management firm that they work with separate from you? Or are you handling that as well?
It's a little different for every client. Some clients will bring in a third-party construction manager.
Yep.
Or program manager for them to help them manage all their program. A lot of our clients have internal departments that are qualified to manage that type of role for them. And so it's just very project dependent.
And how much are you involved in the selling of the project before it gets awarded?
Heavily involved. And that's really, and my focus is helping with the sale, managing the teams once we win the project. It's one thing to win it, it's the next thing to execute it, right?
Yeah.
So my main focus is maintaining those relationships, helping the clients, if they have, they're trying to figure out what's their next build, supporting them, helping them if they have questions, and really seeing it all the way through.
So taking a look at the sales aspect of it for a moment, as you're approaching a new opportunity, how do you set your team up, your internal team up for success in terms of figuring out who the decision makers are in the client team, figuring out how to influence them, how they view your offering, how they view the competition's offering? How do you strategize around a large opportunity? Because obviously, if it's a hospital job, you're not going after like $100,000 deals. You're going after a big deal, and so there's a lot of money, a lot of risk involved. Take us into that strategic process.
Okay. So when you're looking at a big hospital welcoming project, what we're going to look at is, okay, what's our relationship with that client? We're fortunate in the state of Florida that we work for 80% of the clients down here. So then it's we know the client, what are their hot buttons? So if I can identify their hot buttons and what's their key concerns with the project, then I'm going to look at from my internal staff is what team will give us the best opportunity and support that client's needs.
Can you give us some example of those hot buttons that come up typically that you're always looking for?
Yeah, you're looking at like the complexity of the job. If it's a heavy renovation, I'm going to look for a team that I know that has heavy renovation experience that really excels at that. If it's a large central energy plant expansion, I'm going to look at a team that has central energy plants and who I know. One, if I'm looking from my team standpoint, do they have a relationship? Have they built any of their projects before? Because every client has their own building standards. So if they have worked for them, okay, that's a plus. Next, then do they have what skills do they have that are similar to their project? But then I'm looking at from a superintendent and project manager, their interactions personality wise. You have this type personality as a superintendent, this type person as project manager. Will they mesh well together? And how do they really form a cohesive team?
What are some of the red flags that you look for that tell you that even if, let's say, we're a technical fit for this job, the relational fit isn't going to be there and we shouldn't take this job on? Do you have a perspective like that? Or are you like, well, if there's a technical fit, we'll just figure it out?
Yeah, we do. I mean, when we're looking at projects, we want a client that's going to be a partner with us. If they're very much we're the client, we're going to be, it's our way or the highway, and they don't want to listen to the designers or us, that's a hard fit to really have a team mesh together. We're fortunate enough that all our clients in South Florida don't really operate that way. I mean, healthcare is a little unique. We've seen it in some of our other sectors, where you might get a developer client that's a little bit more of a strong arm approach. I mean, but you can usually see if they're not open to ideas from you, it's usually going to create down the road, there's going to be a problem.
It's interesting. Now, you were talking earlier about handling conflict. And, that's really the job of any construction professional. It's to handle the conflict. How do you work through a difficult conversation?
Well, first and foremost, you just got to be open and you got to call it like it is. We all are going to make mistakes. When I make a mistake, I expect me and my people to go just own it. And it's like, hey, we made a mistake. Here's what the mistake was. Here's what we're going to do to fix it. And this is how we're going to move forward. And I think a lot of times people want to deflect, or like, oh, this happened because of somebody. No, we had a problem. We can get to the root cause of what really, of how we got to that after the fact. But right now we have a problem. We got to figure out what's the best solution to move forward and move forward from it.
How do you balance? There's a phrase that I often hear from construction pros is like, in a certain way, we're making sausage here, right? The client wants the sausage. We don't necessarily want to show them how the sausage is being made. How do you balance that openness with not exposing them too much to stuff that they don't need to know about?
So I would challenge that as why don't they need to know it? What do we hide? And that's our approach, is that we have nothing to hide here. Truthfully, I need to know your business better just so it'll help me be a better manager for you. So that's the kind of approach I take, is that I want to know your business better than you know it, so that I can help you as we go through this process. And if you want to learn my business, come on, let's do it. I think we act like it's top secret stuff, but it's really not.
Yeah.
You know what we're dealing with. So like, why? Why do we have to hide that?
Yep. How about when you have an internal conflict sometimes what happens in construction companies that I've seen is, let's say you have a project manager who's working on a project, and they sometimes take the side of the owner over the company, and they put the interests of the owner above the interests of the company, and it affects the company in a negative way. Have you ever seen that, or is that not something, a challenge that you guys have?
That's not really a challenge for us. I mean, we try to lay the expectations front. What's the best interest of the project?
Right.
It's not about this, and this is what I try to strive with everyone is like, it's not about the job we're building today. We're building a long-term relationship.
Right.
So what's the best interest for this moment to solve the problem we're dealing with?
How do you handle your calendar? Because it sounds like you're involved in winning work. You're also involved in the building of the projects and the managing of the people. What does your typical calendar look like on a weekly basis?
Whew, it's a lot. So I guess let me start with my typical day. I mean, I'm fortunate enough to have a lot of good individuals that work for us and that can help manage, so I do rely on them. And so that's the beauty of the group I have down here. I mean, but my typical day is personal level. Like I'm going to start my day off. I like to read in the morning. So I do like a daily meditation, kind of help with just keep the stress down, set the tone for the day. I have a couple different affirmation books I read just to kind of set the tone. And then from there, it's my typical day goes into, okay, I look at my calendar. On any given day, there's going to be probably some staff meetings that I have to attend to. Then I have that broken down in certain time blocks. Then I have project. So I need to address. So then I'll go into my project operational role. And then if, with sales pursuits, I'll block out a window for sales pursuits and then a corporate window. What I generally do though, is I try to tell my team to operate from a standpoint of when it comes to setting meetings in the world we're in now with Teams meetings, we have gotten really good at scheduling a ton of meetings.
Yeah.
So I said, look, the expectation is Friday at lunch, you don't need, unless you have an important meeting that's been called by the client, you need to block that time out to focus on your activities. Because if you don't, what happens is you'll just get stacked up with meetings and meetings. Yep. So I try to give time blocks where I can focus on certain activities that I need to get done for the day.
How do you work with your team in terms of interrupting you? Do they know when they can, because, some people have an open door policy and they get interrupted all throughout the day and they're unable to do deep work. Other people are a little more disciplined with that and they say, no, you can't talk to me now, but you can talk to me later. What is the way that you handle that typically?
I have a very open door policy. So it does, there's times where I always tell everybody, my phone's always on. And I've had the 8:00 phone call. That's how I like to operate because I think in what we're doing, healthcare is 24/7. So we don't have opportunity to shut it down.
Yeah, right.
So we have to kind of operate that way too.
Yes.
Knowing that they're not going to shut their operations down, we got to manage that too. So there's give and take. If I have an employee that my phone rings, if I can't answer in the moment, I'm going to call them back within an hour or two for sure.
Yep.
And then what I'll do with my priorities is that I'll just find another time. So I take the open door approach. It can be a lot. It can be.
Yeah. One of the challenges that I find with a lot of folks is in executive leadership is they hang on to people who are poor performers for too long. And their performance is interesting. It's not necessarily the technical capabilities of the person, but it's more the fit into the organization, the cultural fit. How do you avoid hanging on to people for too long? How do you know when it's time to part ways as opposed to time to coach or trying to develop?
That's a difficult one. That is something that I think we're all challenged with. If I have a situation like that, I'm going to give them every opportunity to elevate before we get to that position. And to me, that's a last resort. We don't have a high turnover in our organization, and we pride ourselves in that. But, at the same time, we're not afraid to coach you either and work through those. If we see areas of focus, we need to make sure that you start elevating your game too. So it's a difficult one. Some organizations have more of a stricter approach where, they will take that directive action. I think you got to look at the aspect of the individual. What's really causing their problems? Is it personal? Is there, can we help them there? Is it professional? Until you get to the point, it's like, you know what? They don't want to take the initiative themselves and they don't really have that take. I think that's the last resort.
It's interesting from the personal perspective because, I can think of a time in my career where I was going through some personal challenges and the people I was working for someone at the time and they worked with me, and they gave me space to kind of come out of that trough. And like you said, there's sometimes when people get into these funks, but the funk is going on for a while and it seems like the personal side is not going to be able to be remedied. How do you know when it's time to move on, and how do you handle that yourself emotionally, knowing that, you have a connection with this person and you have a sense of responsibility for them as well?
I think when you have an individual who has a deep personal issue they're working through, and you try to help them get through it, and you tell that it's going to be a long-term thing that's really going to impact. If they're not able to perform, then it's a conversation. And it's very, it's hard, very difficult conversation to have.
Yeah.
Because you have that personal connection. You know the struggles they're going through. It's like, that's hard. Life is hard. We all have our own personal struggles, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like, at some point you got to tell them, say, hey, I need you to step away. I'm not shutting the door on you at all. I've never shut the door on anyone dealing with something like that. It's like,
right.
Hey, I need you to step away and get this addressed. The door's open. Get it addressed and let's come back.
Right.
I want you to come back. But I can tell you're affected by something, depending on the situation. This is deeply affecting you. We understand that. But at this point, we need you to step away and get it clean and come back.
So what do you do when you get promoted and have to make the shift from building projects to building teams of people? That's what we're talking about here with Johnathan today, amongst other topics, and that's where my book comes in, Construction Genius. Effective, hands-on, practical, simple, no BS, sales strategy, marketing, and leadership advice for construction companies. You go out and you buy my book and you do what many people do. You read one chapter a week, you take notes, and you apply one thing from that one chapter in your leadership role. And over time, you incrementally improve the way that you lead. And the reason why this book is ideal for that is because it is packed with practical things that you can do every day to be a better leader. So go out to Amazon and purchase a copy for yourself and every single leader in your organization, like other construction companies have done. Read all the reviews when you go to Amazon. We have a 5-star rating. We have over 50 reviews from people who have read the book. A lot of detailed insights into why the book is impactful and why it is useful. And then just spend $20, actually less than $20, $19.99 per book. Get yourself a copy for you and all of your team. I know you'll enjoy it. All right, back to my interview with Johnathan. What is your long-term vision for your part of the organization and your role in it? Because you've climbed the ladder, so to speak. What happens when you get to the top of the ladder, or what is the top of the ladder for you?
It's a funny one. But at this point, when you're starting out your career, you can set points, right? This is where I want to be at this point. And I will tell you, whatever time period you have in your head, that's going to change, right? You think I was young, I was eager. I set a strict timeline. I'm going to be this by this age.
Yeah.
Well, okay. The older me has realized there's no truth to that. There's no way you can really base it on that. It's all about your growth, and you all have your own unique journey. For me now, my focus is ensuring that I give every employee the opportunity to be successful, continue to grow our business and our unit, and leave it when I step away is leave it the way I left it, in a great position, the way I took it over. It was in a great position when I got it.
Right.
I want to leave it in a better position.
What have you learned in your leadership role, and how long have you been in this specific role?
4.5 years.
What have you learned in that time that has surprised you?
As much as I plan, I can't control all the outcomes. You got to know that you can't control it all. And whether, like on the whole sales pursuit, whether you think you're the most qualified and you just kill it in the presentation, you still might not get the job. And it's nothing you did wrong. It's just part of it.
Yep.
And so you got to be able to roll with those punches and adapt.
What advice would you give to someone who's stepping into a senior role like yours in terms of preparing for it as they shift from being project focused to people focused?
I would tell them to make sure you got to trust your people. Mm-hmm. You're going to be transitioning from doing tasks that you're not going to be able to do like you used to do when you're managing projects.
Right.
So trust your people. Know that you're going to spend a lot of time on your time management and focusing how you focus your time management.
Yeah.
And that it's going to be stressful. It's going to be difficult. You're going to have to adapt. You might think you know how you want to do it, but you got to be open to, maybe I don't have this figured out. And listen to the people around you that have good ideas and have people challenge you. I'm a firm believer in that. Like, I don't operate from a mindset of, this is my way of doing it. You're going to do it this way. I have a core group. They know that they can challenge me and we can have a conversation. If they think I'm doing it wrong, tell me. Tell me why. I'm open to that feedback. Maybe you're right. Maybe there is a better way to do this that I'm not seeing. So I think from a leadership standpoint, if you take that mindset, it will help you be a better leader, and it gives your team more. They support you way harder and longer by doing that. 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. You familiar with that book?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So very much that principle I live by. So,
okay. So the 5 dysfunctions of a team, the first one is a lack of trust, right?
Correct.
The second one is a fear of conflict. Then what is it? A lack of accountability?
Accountability. Yeah.
right? There's the inattention to the results. I missed one of them.
Yeah, and I'm drawing a blank too.
Yeah, but anyway, it's an excellent book. It's kind of old school now. I mean, it's been around for like 20 years. I'll tell you a funny story, Jonathan. Actually, when I started my business, I was calling on some old clients from a previous business. And one of my clients, he came out, he said, Eric, we were just talking about you. And he held up the book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And he said, hey, can you do a workshop for us based on this book? And I'd never read the book, but, I was just starting my business. So I needed some business. I was like, sure. So I read the book and then that had a huge impact. It was really quite a positive thing.
Yeah. It's that accountability. Accountability is where it's at. I mean,
okay, so let's talk about that accountability. How do you have an accountable conversation with someone? How do you handle that type of conversation specifically?
So from a leadership position, like when I make a mistake or if I do something and go, oh, that didn't really go the way I wanted, I take ownership in it.
Yeah.
I don't just try to fall on that sword and act like it was the right decision. I go, you know what? We could have done that differently. I could have done that differently and I failed. And so how do we move forward? Yeah,
it's interesting, right? How do you work with someone who is, because the idea of trust is being willing to be transparent with people, right? And, sometimes people are in situations where they have an ego or they have an issue with someone. And so that lack of transparency is there, that lack of trust is there, and you just feel it, you just feel it in the room, so to speak. How do you go after that specifically?
Generally it starts with a conversation. I go, tell me why you feel this way, right? Yeah. What do you think about this? And we have plenty of people that have, egos. We all have a little bit of ego, right?
Of course.
We all have a personality.
Yep.
But how do we learn to work with those and how do we manage them? And what, we do a lot of DISC assessments too. So we're looking at personality. So I'm like, what is it about that person that's bothering you? And it's like, let's have a conversation. And then I'll have it with the other person if it's between two people. And then I'll bring them in a room and we sit down and go, let's just talk, guys and gals. Let's just figure out, what can I do better to support you so that you don't feel this way? And vice
that's
versa.
Interesting. How do you know when it's like, okay, so you've put this team together and two people are just clashing. And what I find many times is the people who clash the most are the people who are most similar.
They are.
You know what I mean? And it's like you're looking at two peas in the pod right there. And it seems like they bring out the worst in each other. But when they're with other people, they do fine. So how do you handle that particular situation? Particularly if, let's say, in a project where they're both a technical fit and they both have maybe different areas of the project that they're handling. And so you would really love them to be able to work well together, but they just don't.
You do see that from time to time. I think you might get two type D personalities, right? And those are very dominant, right?
Yeah.
So how do you make them have the balance? And what I'll do is sometimes I'll bring in support between them, or I might be that mediator between them and really spend time coaching them on the different aspects of why we're having this conflict and working through it.
That's interesting. Let's just wrap this here. As someone is coming into that leadership role, what is the one thing that you would tell them to avoid at all costs that will sabotage their success?
When I think of it, I was like, let's think about this. So for me, the one thing would be, don't be afraid to be vulnerable. If you don't show vulnerability, you're going to end up losing your group. And it's okay to be vulnerable. Along with that, I would tell you, from a personal level, is that when you're coming in this position, there's going to be challenges with stress and that personal aspect. You need to spend time and think about it. And whatever your stress outlet is, or if you don't have one, you need to find one because it's going to be tough.
Hopefully a healthy one, huh?
Yeah, that's right. A healthy habit. So, I think it's just thinking mindfully about, all right, what are you doing? You're in charge with leading a bunch of individuals. They're looking at you. So when you walk in the room, if your energy's down, they're going to see that.
Right.
And they're going to gravitate to that. So you have to be on point and know that you're going to be the face. And that's a challenge. So you can't let your emotions come through. No matter how much you're dealing with, you need to stay calm and collective, and you got to be that voice of reason. And even if there's a fire behind you saying everything's calm, we got this, we can work through it.
Yeah, it's interesting. In a certain way, that requires a tremendous amount of self-control.
It does.
So it's a difficult thing to do consistently over a long period of time.
There's going to be plenty of opportunities where your blood pressure is going to be through the roof.
Yep.
And if you can stay calm and collected, your team will see that and they will start operating that way. If they see you lose your cool or if you're having a bad day, they're going to gravitate to that.
Yeah, it's interesting, huh? So your team ultimately is a reflection of you as a leader.
They are.
That's great. That's great. So Johnathan, tell people a little bit more about yourself in terms of how they can get in touch with you if they want to connect after listening to this interview.
Yeah, if you like to connect, you can reach out to me through Robins Morton. My email is always perfect. jpeavy@robinsmorton.com, as well as you can find me on the internet. You can get my direct line on the internet, but
Search and you'll find him on LinkedIn and all that kind of good stuff. Okay,
That's
so
right.
last question here, Johnathan. I'm in Fort Lauderdale. What's the one restaurant I need to go to?
Ooh, that's a toughie. We might have to narrow it down to like what type of food you want to go with.
Okay, so what's your favorite type of food?
Probably if we're going steakhouse in Fort Lauderdale, Daniel's is well known. Yeah.
Okay. And if I'm going to Daniel's, what's the one dish you're going to get at Daniel's?
Probably say go ribeye.
Ribeye. Nice. Ribeye at Daniel's. Okay, we'll have a link in the show notes to Daniel's in Fort Lauderdale. And go for the ribeye while you're there. Johnathan, I really appreciate you coming on the show today. Thanks for chatting with us. I enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to my interview with Johnathan today. Feel free to connect with him on LinkedIn and other places. You can check out the company Robins Morton at robinsmorton.com. And there's a link in the show notes to the steakhouse that he recommended in Fort Lauderdale. Last ask, please give us a rating and a review wherever you get your podcasts. Reach out anytime if you have any questions about the podcast. Really appreciate you listening. Feel free to share this interview with other people, and I'll catch you on the next episode. Thank you for listening to this episode of Construction Genius. Hope you found that 1% of inspiration to help you in the next few days. If you like the show, please give us a 5-star review on iTunes, share it with other construction leaders who you think would benefit, and always remember that the show is brought to you by Kick-Ass Meetings. I've been working with construction leaders since 2004, teaching them how to run extremely effective problem-solving meetings that gets their people collaborating, taps into their creativity, and to get yourself a free copy of the Kick-Ass Meeting Report, go to www.ericanderton.com/kickassmeetings. Grab yourself that free report, read it, use it in your business. You'll find it extremely useful. And thanks again for listening.